My name is Lisa Wynn, and I am 22 years old. From the moment I was old enough to understand words like responsible and disappointment, I knew which one belonged to me. I was the older daughter, the standard bearer. If anything went wrong, the finger pointed in my direction first. Meanwhile, my younger sister Lydia seemed to float through life with a halo only my parents could see. Lydia was 3 years younger than me, and somehow that gap felt like an entire universe. If we both broke the same rule, say, leaving dirty dishes in the sink or forgetting to turn in homework, I was the one who got the lecture, the punishment, the grounding. Lydia got a soft sigh and a warning about being more mindful. Sometimes I wondered if we lived in different households. One night still burns in my memory. I was 16. Lydia was 13. We'd both snuck out to a party, giggling in the bathroom mirror as we lined our eyes with clumsy eyeliner. We came home at 1 a.m, both caught red-handed when the porch light flicked on and Dad was waiting. He sent Lydia inside with a shake of his head. Me? I was grounded for a month. Lydia got to talk about making better choices. I stayed up in my room afterward, staring at the ceiling, trying to swallow the bitterness rising in my throat. So I leaned into the label. If I was destined to be the responsible one, then I would do it better than anyone. I poured myself into books, into exams, into being someone no one could ignore. I graduated high school with honors, won a partial scholarship to college, and still picked up shifts at a bookstore to cover what the scholarship didn't. During those years, I found an unlikely ally, Aunt Mildred. She was my father's aunt, a sharp-witted woman who lived 20 minutes from campus. Unlike my parents, Aunt Mildred never made me feel like second best. She'd pat my hand after I carried her groceries in and murmur, "You're the only one who bothers to visit. Don't think I don't notice." I'd smile back, warmth blooming in my chest. "I like spending time with you, Auntie. You don't compare me to Lydia." Her eyes, still bright beneath her silver hair, would soften. "That's because you don't need to be compared. You're enough." Her words stuck to me like a bandage on a wound no one else could see. Meanwhile, Lydia drifted. She dropped out of high school, scraped by with a GED, and filled her time with boyfriends who changed as quickly as the seasons. My parents worried, sure, but their worry came sugar-coated with excuses. "She's just finding herself," or "she's more free-spirited than you." When Lydia turned 18, she vanished overnight with a guy named Rick. He had a motorcycle, a leather jacket, and a job so flexible that no one could pin down what he actually did. My parents fell apart. They called hospitals, begged the police, even hired a private investigator. Mom cried until her voice went hoarse. Dad walked around like a man who had lost a limb. 3 months later, Lydia strolled back into the house as if she'd gone on vacation. "Rick was a jerk," she explained casually over dinner, so she'd left him. That was it. No consequences, no reckoning for the sleepless nights she'd caused. My parents were so relieved that they clung to her as though nothing had happened. I sat at the table, watching Lydia spoon mashed potatoes onto her plate while my mother stroked her hair. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why my mistakes were painted in permanent ink while hers were erasable smudges, but I kept my mouth shut because I already knew the answer. And yet, through all of it, Aunt Mildred's voice lingered in my ears. "Trust your instincts. They'll rarely steer you wrong." At the time, I didn't know how much I would need those words. The phone call came in my final year of college. Aunt Mildred had passed away quietly in her sleep. I sat frozen in the library when the words registered, my highlighter hovering above a page I'd never remember reading. She was gone. The one person who had never made me feel small vanished like the closing of a door. The shock only deepened when I met with the lawyer. Aunt Mildred had updated her will a year prior, leaving everything, her modest house, her savings, her carefully kept accounts, to me. $150,000. When I told my mother, her reaction wasn't grief, it was suspicion. "She left it all to you?" she asked, her voice thin with surprise. "Yes," I whispered. My throat was still tight. "The lawyer said she'd made changes last year." Mom's silence lingered, then she sighed. "Well, you were always her favorite." Her tone wasn't admiration. It was accusation, as if I'd manipulated an old woman into writing me a check. The truth was simpler and harsher. I had been there. Lydia hadn't. My parents barely showed up except for holidays. When Lydia found out, her voice carried the sharpness of jealousy she didn't bother hiding. "That's so unfair," she snapped one night when I visited home. "You get a degree and now a pile of money? What about me?" "What about you?" I shot back before I could stop myself. Years of bitterness clawed their way out. You had the same chances I did. You didn't take them. Her face twisted. You think you're better than me, don't you? Before I could answer, Dad cut in. Girls, that's enough. Lisa, don't be so harsh. Lydia's trying to figure things out. It was always the same refrain. Lydia was figuring things out. I was supposed to already have it all together. I went back to campus that night and sat on my bed, staring at Aunt Mildred's handwriting on a note she'd once left me. Don't let anyone else decide your future, Lisa. Trust yourself. That's when I made my choice. I wasn't going to waste this gift. I was going to bet on myself. I'd been sketching a business plan for months, consulting services for small businesses to streamline their operations. The inheritance gave me the chance to make it real. When I told my parents, they looked horrified. That money could be a down payment on a house, Mom argued. Or save for your future, Dad added. Starting a business is too risky. I looked at them squarely. I've done the research. I know what I'm doing. They exchanged that look, half pity, half disapproval, the one they always gave when I dared to deviate from the script they wrote for me. But this time, they couldn't stop me. The first year was brutal. 18-hour days, stacks of rejection, meals eaten out of takeout boxes while I sat hunched over spreadsheets. There were nights I cried into my pillow, wondering if I'd made a colossal mistake, but I kept going, and slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. By the end of the first year, I had my first employee. By year 3, I had a real office and a small team that believed in me. Meanwhile, Lydia floated from one job to the next, never staying longer than a few months. She'd call sometimes, asking for loans. I gave in more often than I should have. Each time, my parents praised me for helping your sister, never mind that she'd never repay me. By the time I turned 27, my company was thriving. That's when I met Stephen. He worked at one of my client companies, handling their IT infrastructure. Tall, steady-eyed, with a quiet wit that caught me off guard. We'd run into each other in project meetings until one afternoon he asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I've been working up the courage for weeks, he admitted, cheeks slightly red. I laughed. And here I thought you were just really enthusiastic about network security. He smiled, the kind of smile that made my shoulders unclench for the first time in years. After so long focusing only on survival and success, it felt strange to be seen as more than just the responsible one. With Stephen, I could breathe. 2 years later, he knelt on a windy cliffside by the coast and asked me to marry him. For the first time, I thought maybe the universe was finally balancing its scales in my favor. The months leading up to the wedding were a blur of decisions. Flowers, invitations, seating charts I didn't care much about. Stephen insisted on helping, his calm energy smoothing over my bursts of stress. One evening, while we sat at the kitchen table surrounded by half-opened envelopes, I called my parents to confirm head counts. Mom, I said, pen between my teeth, I just need to know if Lydia RSVP'd yet. The caterer's pressing me. The silence on the other end stretched too long. Finally, Mom exhaled. Oh, honey, Lydia won't be able to make it. She's going through something with someone new. It's complicated. I closed my eyes, the familiar ache of frustration settling in my chest. Of course, Lydia's dramas always took precedence. Still, part of me felt relief. The idea of her showing up, turning the day into a stage for her own theatrics, it wasn't what I wanted. The wedding itself felt almost unreal, as if I'd stepped into someone else's life for a day. The lake shimmered behind us, the early autumn leaves casting gold into the breeze. Stephen's hand trembled slightly as he slipped the ring onto my finger. When we kissed, the cheer that rose from our 50 guests felt like an embrace I hadn't known I needed. For once, I was the center of something good. My parents even looked happy, though Mom whispered more than once, Lydia would have loved this cake. On our brief honeymoon in Maui, Stephen and I walked barefoot along the sand, the water curling around our ankles. He talked about dreams, maybe buying a house, maybe starting a family one day. I found myself smiling at the future for the first time instead of fearing it. But when we returned, real life pressed in quickly. One evening, as I unpacked our suitcases, Stephen leaned against the doorframe, his voice careful. I've been thinking about making a change, he said. What kind of change? I asked, folding a sundress. My company's restructuring. My role might get cut, or shifted, but... He hesitated, then added, What if I came to work for you? You've mentioned needing someone to handle 8 in operations. That's my wheelhouse. I stared at him. Work together? As husband and wife? Stephen, that's risky. I know. But I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't believe in us. And in you. Think about it. Less travel, more time together. We'd be building something side by side. I lay awake that night, weighing the risks. Mixing business with marriage was like walking a tightrope in a storm. But he was competent. I trusted him. And beneath all my fears, I wanted to believe in a future where I wasn't carrying everything alone. A week later, I agreed. We set boundaries. Clear roles, no talking business past 8 p.m., no bringing work arguments home. For a while, it worked. The company grew. Stephen thrived as operations director. I felt, maybe for the first time, that I wasn't fighting alone. But life doesn't give you peace without asking for a price. Late one night, as I was setting my phone on the nightstand, it lit up with an incoming call. Mom. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to answer. Lisa, she said, voice tight, I need to talk to you about Lydia. She's back home. That relationship she was in, it ended badly. She needs help. She needs stability. I closed my eyes, pressing my thumb against my temple. Mom, I can't. She needs a job, Mom pushed, her voice cracking. You have a successful business. Surely there's something she could do there. Family helps family. I let the silence stretch. The memory of Lydia's smirk at the dinner table after Aunt Mildred's will burned in my mind. She's never kept a job for more than 3 months, I finally said. I can't risk my company on... Just meet with her, Mom interrupted. Please, Lisa, she's changed. I promise. Aunt Mildred would have wanted you to help. Her words cut deep. Aunt Mildred's name felt like a key in a lock I didn't want to open. That night, as I vented to Stephen, expecting him to back me up, he surprised me. Maybe you should give her a chance, he said gently. Family is important. People can change. I frowned at him. You don't know Lydia like I do. He shrugged. Maybe not. But what if this time is different? His words unsettled me, because if even Stephen thought Lydia deserved another chance, maybe I was the one being unreasonable. And so, against my instincts, I agreed to see her. When Lydia walked into my office, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone were the messy ponytails, smudged eyeliner, and wrinkled shirts I'd grown up seeing. She wore a tailored blazer, her hair neat, makeup minimal. She sat with her back straight, a polite smile on her lips. Thank you for seeing me, she said, her voice steady but softer than I remembered. I know you have every reason to doubt me. I studied her, searching for cracks. My instinct screamed caution, but my mother's pleading voice echoed in my ears. I folded my hands on the desk. What do you want, Lydia? I want a fresh start. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a certificate from a business administration program. I've been working hard. I needed to prove to myself and to you that I'm serious about changing. For a long moment, I just stared at the paper. The Lydia I knew barely had the patience to finish a meal, let alone a year-long course. And yet here she was, sitting in front of me, dressed like a professional, speaking like she belonged. Against my better judgment, I agreed. 3-month probation, that's all. Her face lit up with relief. Thank you, Lisa. I won't let you down. I placed her under Stephen's department. It seemed safest. He'd see through any laziness, and he could report back honestly. To my surprise, the first weeks passed without incident. Lydia showed up early, eager. She charmed clients, answered phones, even stayed late. More than once, Stephen came home saying, she's actually good with people, clients like her. I'd force a smile, but a knot formed in my stomach each time. This wasn't the sister I knew. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe I didn't know her anymore. As weeks turned into months, I traveled more for expansion projects. Each time I returned, I'd find Lydia more seamlessly woven into the fabric of the company. Employees chatted with her in the break room. Stephen praised her efficiency. I felt like an outsider in my own creation. One evening, during a staff gathering, I watched Stephen and Lydia laugh together at some inside joke. Their faces turned toward each other, too close, too familiar. My skin prickled. I brushed it off, told myself I was paranoid. But when I tried to join the conversation, Lydia's smile faltered, just for a second, like a curtain slipping before it was yanked back into place. Something wasn't right. That unease grew heavier when Frank, our head of security, started acting strange. Frank had been with me from the early days, a retired police officer with a dry wit and a habit of calling everyone kiddo. But now he avoided my eyes in meetings, cut conversations short when I walked in, and sometimes looked at me like he pitied me. One night, after everyone had left, I called him into my office. He shifted in his chair, restless. "Frank," I said, leaning forward, "something's bothering you. I can see it. Tell me what it is." He hesitated, then finally spoke. "Miss Wynne, you need to see something. From the security footage." A chill crept up my spine. "Show me." He handed me his tablet. The screen lit up with footage from the office hallway. My heart sank as I watched. Stephen and Lydia walking side by side, laughing. Then, his hand brushed hers. Her face tilted up. And suddenly, they were kissing, pressed against the wall before disappearing into the storage room. My mouth went dry. My fingers trembled as Frank swiped to another clip. Different day, different corner. Same betrayal. Over and over, across weeks. I couldn't breathe. "How long?" I asked, barely a whisper. 3 months at least, Frank said quietly. His eyes were heavy with sorrow. "I'm sorry, Lisa." The tablet felt like it burned in my hands. All those late nights, all those glowing reports. My husband and my sister, under my roof, in my company. The world tilted beneath me. I drove home in a haze, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly the skin on my knuckles turned white. Every mile between the office and my house, I replayed the images again and again. Stephen's hand on Lydia's back, Lydia tilting her head toward him like she belonged there. When I walked in, Stephen was humming in the kitchen, stirring pasta sauce as if nothing had changed. The domestic normalcy made bile rise in my throat. "Hey, you're home early," he said with a smile. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone and pressed play on the video Frank had given me. The sound of their laughter filled the room. Stephen froze, his eyes locked on the screen, his face draining of color. "Lisa, I can explain." "Explain what?" My voice trembled, a mix of fury and heartbreak. "How you've been sleeping with my sister in my company's hallways?" He set the spoon down, reaching for me. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." I stepped back. "Don't you dare touch me." He opened his mouth again, but I cut him off, screaming so loudly my throat burned. "Pack your things and get out. You're done here, both of you. You're fired." His lips parted, then closed. He knew there was no room left to argue. That night, I sat at my desk, drafting termination papers for both of them. My hands shook as I signed my own husband's name on the line that ended his career at my company. The next day, the phone started ringing. "Mom." Over and over. I ignored her until I couldn't anymore. "What is going on, Lisa?" she demanded the moment I answered. "Stephen's at our house. Lydia won't stop crying. You need to come fix this." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. "Did you know?" I asked quietly. Her silence said everything. When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, they were all there. Mom, Dad, Lydia, and Stephen. The 4 people who should have been my foundation now looked like strangers waiting to ambush me. Without a word, I connected my phone to the TV and played one of the videos. The screen showed Stephen and Lydia kissing, her hand tangled in his hair. Mom gasped theatrically. Dad looked at the floor. Lydia covered her face and sobbed. "How could you all betray me like this?" My voice cracked. For a moment, the room hung heavy with guilt, but then Mom recovered. Her expression hardened. "Lisa, nobody meant to hurt you. These things happen. People fall in love unexpectedly." Lydia lifted her tear-streaked face, and in a voice trembling with practiced fragility, she said, "We didn't want it to happen, but we couldn't stop it. Stephen and we're in love." Stephen reached for her hand. I thought my stomach might turn inside out. And then Lydia said the words that split the world in two. "I'm pregnant." The air left my lungs. "What?" "Almost 4 weeks," she whispered, her palm resting delicately on her stomach. "We were going to tell you next week." I staggered back as if she had struck me. "That doesn't excuse what you did," I said, clinging to the last thread of control in my voice. Stephen leaned forward, his tone suddenly cold. "You can't fire us without cause. That's illegal. We'll sue you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Sexual misconduct in the workplace isn't cause?" Dad finally spoke, his voice sharp with judgment. "You're overreacting, Lisa. Nobody should lose their livelihood over this." "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. Lydia sniffled, her tears drying into calculation. "I am under enormous stress because of you. My doctor says the baby could be at risk. I have medical documentation." I stared at her. "Medical documentation? You planned this." She lifted her chin. "We're getting married as soon as your divorce is finalized, and you'll pay for everything you've done to us. Firing a pregnant woman? The courts will destroy you." Mom nodded furiously. "She needs stability, Lisa. You need to reinstate them both immediately." "Or what?" I asked. Or we'll file a lawsuit tomorrow, Stephen said flatly. Wrongful termination, emotional distress, endangerment of an unborn child. How do you think your clients will react to those headlines? Dad sighed dramatically. We don't want it to come to that, but you've left us no choice. I looked around at their faces. My mother, who once told me to protect my little sister. My father, who lectured me about duty. My husband, who vowed fidelity. My sister, who had always taken everything I worked for. And in that moment, I realized I was standing alone. Without another word, I walked out. The morning after I walked out of my parents' house, I called James Patterson. His name had been whispered among business circles for years. A divorce lawyer with a reputation for being as sharp as a scalpel and as unflinching as stone. When I explained my situation, he listened quietly, then asked one question that stopped me cold. Lisa, are you sure betrayal is only happening in your personal life? People who cross boundaries there often cross them elsewhere. Have you checked your company's finances? My heart lurched. I hadn't. Within days, James assembled a team of auditors. They combed through accounts I'd trusted Stephen to oversee. The results made my stomach drop. Forged invoices, phantom consulting fees, vendor payments that led straight to Lydia's account, and worse, to my parents' accounts. Stephen had siphoned money for months, slipping funds out like water through a cracked pipe. Lydia had padded expense reports with luxury clothes, spa treatments, even vacations disguised as business trips. My parents had been paid as consultants, though they'd never lifted a finger for my company. They were all in on it. When I confronted James with the papers in my trembling hands, he nodded grimly. This isn't just infidelity, Lisa. This is fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. We'll fight their lawsuits with evidence of crimes far more serious. True to his word, James moved fast. But Stephen and Lydia struck first. Within a week, they filed lawsuits. Wrongful termination, emotional distress, discrimination against a pregnant woman. Stephen demanded alimony, claiming he was instrumental in my company's growth. Lydia paraded her pregnancy as both shield and sword. My parents filed affidavits supporting them, swearing I had jealously targeted my sister out of spite. The first day in court felt like walking into an execution chamber. Lydia arrived pale, hand on her belly, a perfect image of fragile motherhood. Stephen walked beside her, jaw tight, eyes cold. My parents flanked them like bodyguards. Together they looked like a family, and I, the one betrayed, looked like the outsider. During cross-examination, Lydia's attorney leaned in with a sneer. Ms. Wynne, isn't it true you fired your sister out of jealousy? That you've always resented her? No, I said firmly, my voice echoing in the quiet courtroom. I fired her for inappropriate conduct in the workplace and financial misconduct we have documented extensively. Lydia burst into tears on cue. She's trying to make me lose my baby. The stress she's causing, it could endanger the pregnancy. The judge called for order, but the theatrics worked. The jury shifted uneasily. James stayed calm. One by one, he laid down evidence like a surgeon exposing infection. Bank statements, emails, security footage authenticated by experts, expense reports filled with luxury purchases. And then the dagger, Lydia's business certificate, the one she'd shown me in my office, was proven to be a forgery. But the most devastating blow came from James's private investigators. They had traced Lydia's past. 3 men in another state who had filed police reports against her for credit card fraud, only to mysteriously withdraw complaints. Investigators uncovered that my parents had quietly paid those men off, shielding Lydia from consequences just as they always had. This isn't an isolated mistake, James told the judge, his voice steady. This is a pattern of calculated deceit, supported and enabled by the plaintiffs. My client is not the villain here. She is the victim. For the first time, I saw cracks in Stephen's armor. He avoided my gaze, his jaw clenching harder with each piece of evidence presented. Lydia, still clutching her stomach, whispered furiously to her lawyer. My parents looked smaller than I had ever seen them. The trial stretched for months. Every day I walked into that courtroom felt like peeling back a new layer of betrayal. The financial toll was brutal, but the emotional one cut deeper. Nights blurred into sleeplessness, mornings into nausea. My company wavered under the scrutiny, employees fearful of the headlines. Pregnant woman fired by sister boss. But James was relentless. Piece by piece, he dismantled their performance until the only thing left was the truth, a web of lies, greed, and betrayal. The verdict loomed like a storm on the horizon. The final day in court felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Every sound seemed sharper: the shuffle of papers, the judge's gavel echoing against the wood, Lydia's staged sniffles from 2 rows away. When the judge finally spoke, the room held its breath. Based on the evidence presented, this court rules in favor of the defendant, Ms. Lisa Wynne. The words struck like thunder. Stephen's head dropped into his hands. Lydia gasped, clutching her stomach as if the ruling itself threatened her pregnancy. My mother muttered under her breath, "No, no, this can't be," while my father sat rigid, his jaw clenched, eyes glassy with rage. The judgment was merciless. All funds siphoned from my company were to be returned. Stephen was sentenced to 3 years in prison for embezzlement and fraud. The divorce was finalized with no alimony. Lydia received a suspended sentence with probation, spared jail only because she was pregnant. My parents escaped charges. There wasn't enough evidence to prove their knowledge of the fraud, but their finances were in ruins, drained by legal fees and frozen accounts. As the gavel struck one final time, I felt no triumph, only emptiness. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing like lightning. I walked past them in silence, James at my side, my spine straight but my insides hollow. In the weeks that followed, I tried to settle back into life. I sold the house Stephen and I once shared. Its walls felt poisoned. I moved into a smaller condo near my office, stripped of memories. At work, I faced my employees, explained what had happened, and promised transparency. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with doubt, but I kept showing up, day after day, until the rhythm returned. My parents tried calling at first. Letters arrived, pleading for understanding. I blocked their numbers, returned the mail unopened. Lydia sent nothing. Perhaps prison visits with Stephen consumed her time, or perhaps she knew I would never respond. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned she had given birth to a boy, that she and Stephen had married in the prison visiting room, rings exchanged under fluorescent lights, that she was living with my parents now, the 4 of them struggling to make ends meet. Sometimes, late at night, guilt tried to slip in. I would picture a baby with Stephen's eyes and Lydia's smile, innocent of it all. But then I'd remember the coldness in Stephen's voice when he threatened to sue me, the calculation in Lydia's tears, the way my parents chose them over me every single time. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had destroyed themselves. So I chose not to feel guilty. Instead, I poured myself into rebuilding. My company expanded into new markets, doubling its client base within a year. I joined a trauma support group where strangers with shattered lives taught me something my family never had: solidarity born from honesty. Dating felt impossible. Friends tried setting me up, but I always smiled politely and declined. I'm focusing on my career right now, I'd say. In truth, I was focusing on healing, on learning how to trust myself again after being gutted by the people I should have been able to trust most. One night, I pulled out an old photograph of Aunt Mildred and me. She was laughing, her arm looped through mine. Her voice echoed in memory. "Trust your instincts, Lisa. They'll rarely steer you wrong." I should have listened sooner. I didn't. But I will now. The future feels uncertain, yes, but it's mine. Every step I take forward will be on my terms, not anyone else's. For the first time in my life, I'm not living in my sister's shadow or under my parents' judgment or in a husband's betrayal. I'm standing alone, and I've never felt stronger.